That afternoon, the atmosphere at St. Mark's Church was filled with solemnity and unspeakable sorrow. Marcus Evans, a veteran and the beloved older brother of Judge Clara Evans, was farewelled amidst the choked cries of family and friends. Familiar faces, tearful eyes, all blended into a poignant portrait of loss and respect for the departed. Clara stood silently beside the coffin, her heart feeling crushed amid the flood of emotions. Everyone around her sensed the weight of that moment, a meaningful silence, yet filled with untold stories and smoldering pain. Outside, the steady footsteps of security personnel echoed, creating a space that was both protective and tense. It was understood that this funeral was not just a farewell to Marcus, but also the beginning of a journey for justice, a journey Clara would have to walk through amid scrutinizing gazes and invisible prejudices. In Clara's mind, vivid memories of her brother resurfaced, a courageous man, a warrior not only on the battlefield, but also in life, holding an unwavering belief in justice and fairness. That belief forged the woman Clara is today, a resilient judge, a woman tirelessly fighting for truth. But within that solemn space, a shadowy presence began to creep in. It was a young police officer, Nathan Cole, carrying deep-seated prejudices, watching Clara with suspicious eyes. Though she was a judge, a symbol of justice in Nathan's eyes, she was still just another black woman, an image he found difficult to accept. The contrast between Clara and Nathan foreshadowed the coming upheaval, the challenges and injustices Clara would face not only for herself, but for all those abandoned by the system. Here at Marcus Evans's funeral, the story of justice and prejudice began to unfold not just as an isolated event, but as a powerful echo of human rights and relentless struggle. Before we dive into the heart of the story, tell us a bit. Where are you listening to this story and what time is it? Comment below so we know how far the story has reached and who it has touched. Now let's begin the story together. That day, Clara Evans was not just a daughter and a sister grieving the loss of her beloved brother. She was also a 42-year-old black federal judge who had dedicated her life to protecting justice and human rights within a legal system full of challenges and barriers. Clara grew up in a poor neighborhood where stories of injustice and racial discrimination followed her throughout her early years. But instead of succumbing, she turned those hardships into motivation to study and rise. Step by step, Clara climbed the legal career ladder, becoming one of the rare black women and appointed as a federal judge at the age of 40. Now dressed in her solemn judge's robe, Clara was a symbol of power and fairness. But deep inside, she carried feelings not easily shared. A black woman, even at the peak of power, could not escape suspicious glances, gossip, and the persistent prejudices that lingered in society, and even within places where justice was supposed to be most fairly administered. That morning, as Clara entered the church, each step was heavy with complex thoughts and emotions. She knew she was not just there to attend her brother's funeral, but also to face injustice once again in this very sacred space. Someone close to Clara gently said, "Clara, stay calm. Whatever happens, he wants us to be strong." Clara smiled, gripping that person's hand tightly, her eyes resolute, as if affirming, "He will never die in our hearts. Injustice won't either." However, the arrival of Sergeant Nathan Cole, with his scrutinizing gaze and suspicious attitude, overshadowed that peace. Nathan, a patrol officer in the area, looked at Clara not with respect for a judge, but with suspicion and prejudice deeply rooted in his mind. Clara felt those looks, those doubts, not just from Nathan as an individual, but as a reflection of a system she had fought and continued to fight to change. In that moment, Clara represented not only herself, but also millions of people of color who had suffered injustice and been demeaned no matter their status or power. That contrast between the legal authority Clara held and the discrimination she faced created a simmering tension, a constant reminder that justice in this society remained a long, challenging journey. As the funeral proceeded under the heavy atmosphere, Nathan Cole's figure appeared, making the tension even thicker. Nathan, a 28-year-old white police officer, was notorious within the department for his tough, sometimes brutal attitude, especially toward communities of color. He had faced multiple accusations of racial discrimination, but had never been held accountable. Nathan entered the church, his eyes quickly scanning the room before settling on Clara Evans, the powerful black judge standing near her brother's coffin. His gaze carried suspicion, even contempt, as if he couldn't believe she had the right to be there. A young colleague beside Nathan whispered, That's Judge Evans, Marcus Evans's family. She's well known. But Nathan only gave a cold nod, showing no respect whatsoever. As he approached, Nathan didn't hesitate to speak coldly. What's going on here? I need to check the papers of everyone present. Clara looked Nathan straight in the eye, her tone firm, but gentle. This is my family's funeral. I am here as a judge, not to be checked. Nathan smirked sarcastically. Judge or not, the law must be respected, especially when there's a security concern. His words reflected not only personal disrespect, but also a deep-seated prejudice rooted in Nathan's mindset. To him, Clara was not just a black woman, but a symbol of a system he felt challenged by, even threatened. Psychologically, Nathan harbored a fear of losing power, a feeling that traditional authority was being shaken by people of color, increasingly asserting their place in society. This imbalance made him react by clinging to power at all costs, including using prejudice and discriminatory behavior. Nathan did not realize that his actions only deepened social divides and fractures. He became a symbol of the system in need of change, even though he wasn't ready to acknowledge it himself. Around them, Marcus's family watched the scene with worried and helpless eyes. Clara felt the pain deeply, not just because of the personal insult, but because this was a shared story across generations, the ongoing tale of discrimination and injustice. In that moment, Clara silently vowed, "This is just the beginning. I will not let this story end like this." And her eyes sparked with determination, a small flame but enough to light the path ahead. The soft glow of candles inside the church reflected on Clara Evans's face, her gaze steady like someone accustomed to facing nameless challenges. But that quiet atmosphere was soon shattered by Nathan Cole's hurried footsteps, the young officer in stiff uniform, wearing a cold expression. Nathan approached Clara suspiciously, his voice tense. "Stop. I need you to comply and not make any suspicious moves." Clara curled her lips slightly, replying calmly and firmly, "I have no intention other than attending my family's funeral." But Nathan ignored her, tightening his grip on the holster at his waist, and in a tense moment drew his handgun, pointing it at Clara. "Calm down, I'm just doing my duty. But you need to prove you're not a threat," Nathan said, eyes locked on Clara, full of caution. Feeling the pressure of the situation, Clara maintained remarkable composure. She stood unshaken, her steady gaze challenging him with the courage and authority of a woman who had devoted her life to justice. "You can draw your gun, but I'm a judge. I've written many of the laws you have to follow." Clara said, her voice ringing like a bell, gentle yet powerful. "You may think you are controlling the situation, but you're violating civil rights and insulting my dignity." Silence enveloped the space, broken only by Nathan's heavy breathing and occasional murmurs from the mourners, their eyes anxiously watching every move. Nathan felt the pressure, but pride and deeply ingrained prejudices stopped him from backing down. "If you don't cooperate, I will have to take necessary measures," Nathan said, his tone growing harsher. Clara took slow, deliberate steps, neither fleeing nor resisting, but her presence was a reminder of justice and human rights. She gently said, "I'm not threatening you, but you're threatening the very value of the law." That tense dialogue unfolded in the church where there should have been only comfort and respect for the departed. Nathan, with his gun in hand, and Clara, with legal authority in her eyes, represented two extremes of society, one wielding arbitrary power veiled by prejudice, the other embodying justice, steadfastness, and unwavering courage. Every word, every gesture in that moment was like an invisible battle between light and darkness, power and truth, discrimination and fairness. Clara knew this was not just her personal fight, but a voice for millions abandoned by the system. Everyone present at the church that day, whether family, friends, or strangers, felt the heavy weight of history pressing down on that moment. It was a turning point not only in Clara's life, but also in the fight against racial discrimination and abuse of power. The tense atmosphere at St. Mark's suddenly erupted when Sophia Evans, Clara's 16-year-old daughter, spoke up. With a youthful face but fiery eyes, Sophia looked directly at Nathan Cole, her voice proud and resolute. "You have no right to do this. My mother is a judge, a woman who has dedicated her life to protecting justice. You have no permission to treat her like this." Everyone in the church turned their gaze to Sophia. Some held hands tightly, feeling the strength and courage of the young girl. Soft applause began gradually spreading, rising like waves crashing ashore, creating a powerful sense of unity. A family member, Mr. Benjamin, an uncle who had fought in the civil rights movement, spoke up, his voice serious but determined. We cannot remain silent in the face of this injustice. This is not just the Evans family's fight. It is the fight of our entire community. Those words ignited a fire in everyone's hearts. The community around the church began to gather, raising their voices to defend Clara and oppose Nathan's abuse of power. Voices from many directions intertwined, turning the funeral atmosphere chaotic for a brief moment. Nathan felt the pressure from this unity. He stood still, his eyes flickering with doubt and inner conflict. Under the weight of solidarity and resistance, his actions began to waver. Outside, local residents also gathered, shouting slogans: "Justice, equality, no to racism." These powerful, united chants spread rapidly like lightning through social networks and local media. Sophia, beside her mother, held Clara's hand tightly, her eyes shining with renewed faith and strength. Clara looked at her daughter, sensing the invisible, yet miraculous power from the next generation, those who would continue to fight for the justice she pursued. The event at St. Mark's was no longer just a funeral. It became the starting point for a new movement. The courageous voices and actions of the family and community echoed strongly, awakening many who had remained silent, making them realize that injustice cannot survive if people stand together. In that chaotic moment, Clara knew the battle ahead would be long and difficult, but she also knew that with the power of family love and community solidarity, justice would be restored and prejudices would gradually fade away. At the exact moment Nathan Cole drew his gun and pointed it at Judge Clara Evans, one of the mourners quickly took out a phone and recorded the entire incident. The video captured the tense scene inside the church, a place that should have been solemn, but had instead become a backdrop for abuse of power and racism. Within minutes, the video was uploaded to social media and spread at lightning speed. On platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, thousands of shares, comments, and reactions flooded in. People from all across the country followed the story, expressing outrage and support for Clara while condemning Nathan's actions. The power of images and video in the digital age became clearer than ever. Scenes that might be ignored or covered up by mainstream media were laid bare on social media, awakening empathy and anger within the community. However, opposing reactions also emerged. Some, especially supporters of traditional law enforcement, questioned the video's authenticity or tried to downplay Nathan's actions by arguing he was just doing his duty. Fierce debates erupted on forums and social networks, revealing deep divisions in American society over racial discrimination and police power. This event was also compared to notorious cases like George Floyd, the black man who was killed by a police officer pressing on his neck, sparking global protests in 2020. Like George Floyd, the video of Clara Evans and Nathan Cole became a new symbol in the fight against racial discrimination and police violence. In online comments and posts, many emphasized the indispensable role of social media in promoting justice. They praised those brave enough to record and share the truth while urging everyone to continue watching and not let similar cases be forgotten. However, media experts also warned of the negative sides of social media. Fake news, smear campaigns, and division could harm reform efforts. This posed a major challenge for communities and activists to use media tools wisely and responsibly. Clara, despite facing enormous public pressure, understood that the power of this image could be a double-edged sword. But she also knew she could not remain silent nor allow injustice to continue being covered up. The video and Clara's story became an inspiration to many, a reminder that justice doesn't only reside in powerful offices, but also in every action, every voice recorded and spread on social media. Immediately after the video went viral online, sparking widespread outrage throughout the community, the local police department and city government quickly issued official responses. A press conference was held just hours after the incident to address the growing public pressure. Captain Mark Reynolds, the police spokesperson, appeared in his formal uniform, speaking in a calm but carefully neutral tone. He began with a familiar statement. "We are conducting a thorough internal investigation into the incident at St. Mark's Church. We are committed to uncovering the truth and ensuring any misconduct is appropriately addressed." However, in his choice of words and tone, one could clearly detect a PR strategy to reassure the community while protecting the police department's image. Words like investigation, fairness, and transparency were repeated to build trust with the public. The city government also quickly stepped in, with Mayor Rebecca Thompson expressing that she was deeply concerned about the incident and would closely monitor developments to protect citizens' rights. At the same time, she emphasized the need to support law enforcement in maintaining public order. Despite this, many activists and legal experts viewed these as vague promises lacking concrete commitments and real steps to address the root issues. The reliance on internal investigations without independent oversight was seen as one of the biggest weaknesses in damage control. Public trust, especially within the Black community and civil rights groups, remained low. They were all too familiar with cases of police misconduct being handled superficially or even covered up. Small protests continued at various city locations, accompanied by chants demanding justice and transparency. In the media, major outlets began to dig deeper into the story, analyzing every detail of the video and interviewing witnesses, lawyers, and experts on racial discrimination in law enforcement. This created significant pressure on authorities, forcing responsible agencies to act more transparently. The police and government's PR tactics, while initially shrewd in controlling the situation, were deemed unconvincing and insufficient to quell the growing public anger. Genuine transparencies and concrete actions were what people truly demanded. In this context, Clara Evans and her family became not only victims, but symbols of the systemic change struggle, a reminder that justice cannot rest merely in words, but must be proven through action. As the wave of outrage and protest spread across the community, Clara had no choice but to take the case into the legal spotlight. Standing behind her in this tough battle was civil rights attorney Helen, a seasoned woman known for her perseverance and talent in fighting for justice. Helen and her legal team quickly took on the case, starting by gathering all evidence. The video recording Nathan Cole drawing his gun inside the church, Clara's and witnesses' testimonies from the funeral, and files relating to Nathan's past discriminatory behavior. In a long strategy meeting, Helen carefully analyzed every detail and planned each step for the upcoming trial. She spoke to Clara with a firm, hopeful tone. "We hold the truth and justice on our side. But I must warn you, this will not be an easy fight. The current legal system poses significant barriers for cases like this." Clara nodded, her determined gaze unwavering. "I am ready to face any hardship as long as justice is served." Helen continued, "The law demands clear and transparent evidence, but when facing police forces with strong internal protection, networks collecting evidence is not only difficult but challenging. We must ensure every step is solid to avoid exploitation by the opposition." She shared with Clara stories of famous cases she had participated in where a lack of transparency in police blue wall protection had delayed or undermined many justice efforts. "This is not just a legal battle, but a moral one. We fight not only for Clara, but for all who suffer similar injustice." Outside the meeting room, social organizations and civil rights communities began organizing gatherings, advocacy, and fundraising for the lawsuit. The connection between legal action and social movement created collective strength, empowering Clara and her team. However, no one denied that the road ahead was fraught with obstacles. The system's entanglements, resistance from police-supporting factions, and media pressure were massive challenges. But with careful preparation, strong resolve, and community unity, Helen and Clara believed justice would ultimately shine through. This trial was not just a battle for one woman. It was a symbol of the long, harsh, yet inevitable struggle to cleanse and reform the law enforcement system. Behind the scenes at the police department, Nathan Cole's story was more than just an isolated incident. It revealed a deep internal culture, the blue wall of silence. This was a characteristic many law enforcement agencies across America faced, and it stood as one of the biggest obstacles to reform and the elimination of abuses of power. After the St. Mark's Church incident, Nathan's colleagues began sharing lesser-known stories. Some expressed concern, while others believed Nathan's actions were normal, even necessary in certain situations. Their testimonies during the internal investigation largely conflicted, painting a chaotic and complex picture of the attitudes within the police force. "He was just doing his job," an anonymous officer told the press. "We stand behind each other. It's the only thing keeping us safe in this line of work." But this protection also became a shackle, putting pressure on those who wanted change, transparency, and fairness within the force. Another officer, Maya Johnson, who had tried to speak out against abuse of power, suffered severe consequences from her colleagues, ranging from isolation to intimidation. Clara Evans and attorney Helen Carter contacted Maya to gather information. Her story made them realize that change required more than just a trial. It was a long battle to dismantle the negative blue wall mentality and the unwritten laws within the force. Private meetings took place, and reformers supporting officers began organizing, speaking out, but always cautiously protecting themselves. They knew that standing against this culture meant risking their careers and personal safety. In an interview, Maya spoke in a low, emotional voice. "I'm not against my colleagues. I just want us to be real defenders of justice, not cover-ups for wrongdoing." However, internal pressure remained intense. Rumors and tactics to weaken reform voices continued. The police union also strongly defended Nathan Cole, viewing him as a symbol of professional solidarity. This situation created a massive barrier on the path to real change. But at the same time, it made Clara's and her allies' story stronger and more meaningful than ever. The division within the police force was not just an internal matter. It reflected a society struggling with prejudice, injustice, and a deep need for broad reform. The public trial, a fierce legal battle. The day of the trial finally arrived, and the courtroom was thick with tension. Attendees from Clara Evans's family to journalists and concerned citizens held their breath in silent anticipation. All eyes were fixed on the table where Nathan Cole and his lawyers sat facing Clara and the legal team led by attorney Helen Carter. The trial began with the prosecution's presentation. Helen Carter stood up, her voice firm yet emotional, recounting every detail of the incident: the moment Nathan Cole drew his gun in the church, his prejudiced gaze, Clara's resolute silence. She presented evidence, including videos from witnesses' phones, detailed testimonies from those at the funeral, and files related to Nathan's prior abuses of power. Confronted with undeniable evidence, Nathan's defense lawyers attempted to deny responsibility, arguing that Nathan acted under urgent circumstances and security protocols. But those explanations could not fill the void in the listeners' hearts, especially as witnesses Clara and her daughter Sophia took the stand describing the horror and pain caused by Nathan's actions. The moments in the courtroom grew heavier as Clara described the unjust treatment and threats she endured, yet maintained her calm and determination. Sophia, with a clear but powerful voice, defended her mother, stating, "My mother is not the enemy. She fights for the justice he broke." The legal debate was intense and ongoing, with the defense trying to question the evidence and exploit weaknesses in testimonies. However, the civil rights legal team remained steadfast, delivering sharp analyses on the legality and morality of Nathan Cole's behavior. Outside the courtroom, public pressure did not wane. TV stations, newspapers, and social media continuously updated the developments, sparking heated debate within the community. Opinions were divided. Some supported Clara, others defended the police, but all were caught in the storm of the story. At the trial's most critical moment, the judges faced a heavy responsibility, deciding Nathan Cole's fate and sending a strong message about justice and transparency in law enforcement. This trial was not just a personal power battle. It symbolized a system in desperate need of profound change, where everyone has the right to be protected and treated fairly regardless of skin color or social status. The protest movement and community strength. As news of the trial spread, it ignited a fire in the hearts of thousands, not only in the city, but across the country. On major streets, chants rang out continuously: "Justice for Clara," "End racial discrimination." Multiracial protests blossomed and lasted for days, becoming symbols of a larger movement calling for systemic change. Participants were not only Black, but also white, Latino, Asian, and others. Together, they stood up, not just for Clara, but for millions who have suffered injustice. On every banner and every song, unity and determination shone brightly, a vivid testament to the power of community acting together. Civil rights organizations like the National Civil Rights Alliance and the Fair Action Network quickly became pillars of the movement. Social activists tirelessly organized workshops, forums, and political advocacy, creating significant pressure on authorities and law enforcement agencies. In a public speech, attorney Helen Carter shared, "This movement is not just the voice of one person, one family, or one city. It is the voice of millions yearning for justice and human rights." Sophia, Clara's daughter, also became a symbol of youth and hope. She frequently appeared at protests inspiring the younger generation with her mother's story and their fight for justice. "We can no longer be silent," she said with heartfelt emotion. "Each of us has the power to change this world." At the same time, international media began extensive coverage of the movement. Images of protesters embracing passionate speeches and emotional moments confronting police became icons of solidarity and resilience. However, the movement's strength also faced significant challenges. Protesters were threatened. Some marches were suppressed, and on social media waves of fake news and opposition appeared, creating a complex picture of the struggle. But every challenge only strengthened the resolve of those fighting. Clara's story in the protest movement became a guiding torch for justice and tangible societal change. The movement extended beyond street chants. It pressured politicians to rethink policing, raising urgent questions about police governance, citizens' rights, and fairness for all. Psychological impact on Clara and family journey through darkness. When the courtroom doors closed after the public trial, the tension had barely eased before invisible pressures weighed heavily on Clara Evans and her family. Once a symbol of strength, Clara could no longer avoid moments of vulnerability as she faced deep psychological consequences from the traumatic church incident. At first, Clara clearly felt prolonged exhaustion and stress. She spent sleepless nights, her mind racing over dangerous situations, suspicious looks, and the cold gun Nathan Cole had drawn. These images haunted her, causing frequent anxiety, startled awakenings, and recurring dark nightmares. Sophia, Clara's daughter, was also heartbroken, witnessing her mother's daily changes. "Mom used to be the strongest person I know," she said with teary eyes. "But now I see her having very fragile moments." The Brooks family rallied around supporting each other and sharing the hardest moments, creating a protective emotional embrace so Clara wouldn't feel alone. Community care also brought great strength. Civil rights groups, mental health support teams, and acquaintances all joined efforts to help Clara. Sharing sessions and intensive psychological therapy were organized to help Clara and her family gradually heal emotional wounds. Attorney Helen Carter stood by her side, not only offering legal support but also encouragement, emphasizing that mental health care was an essential part of the long fight against injustice. "We don't just fight on the legal front," she said. "We must keep our minds strong and peaceful." In-depth analysis from social psychologists shows that those affected by racial discrimination, especially when public and violent, often suffer severe psychological stress, sometimes leading to depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Recognizing and providing timely support is critical to prevent them from falling into a spiral of suffering. Clara's story was not just a personal journey, but also a wake-up call on society's need to care for the mental health of racial discrimination victims. It was an important lesson for communities and lawmakers in building practical support policies. Clara's resilience, the unity of her family and community, created a turning point in the recovery process, opening hope for a future free from the shadows of prejudice and violence. Media and the multifaceted story. The battle for information control. In today's world where information spreads rapidly and without limits, the story of Judge Clara Evans and the incident at the church quickly became a hot topic across all media fronts. But along with this widespread dissemination came a fierce battle over controlling the narrative where truth and falsehood intertwined, causing deep consequences. From the earliest days after the incident, civil rights attorney Helen Carter worked closely with investigative journalists and social organizations to ensure the story was told honestly, comprehensively, and fairly. They held press conferences, released documents, and created media programs to provide the public with verified evidence, witness testimonies, and in-depth analysis. Helen said in an interview, "We must work tirelessly to keep this story from being distorted or hidden by misinformation or fake news." She understood that in this fight, accurate information not only clarifies the truth, but also empowers social change. However, alongside reliable sources, waves of fake news and misinformation quickly appeared on social media. Baseless rumors, edited videos, and inflammatory comments increased polarization in public opinion. Certain websites and social media accounts deliberately spread false information to discredit Clara and activists, even threatening their safety. Investigative journalist Michael Nguyen shared, "We face not only the search for truth, but also opposition from negative media campaigns aiming to obscure and derail the main story." He recounted receiving threatening messages and harsh reactions from opposing groups. In this context, transparency and responsibility from mainstream media became more crucial than ever. Major outlets needed to commit to fair reporting, avoiding judgmental bias or personal attacks. Detailed explanations of context, law, and social aspects help viewers understand more deeply and avoid falling for false information. Social organizations also intensified efforts to educate the community on recognizing fake news and enhancing critical information skills. They held online workshops, shared guides on verifying sources, and encouraged sharing only carefully vetted information. The multifaceted story was built not only to serve legal purposes, but also to inspire and foster social consensus. The close cooperation between lawyers, journalists, and social organizations helped create a strong, unified voice, clarifying injustices and calling for action. Clara Evans' story was not just a legal case, but a profound lesson on the power of transparent media in the fight against racism and social injustice. It showed that in the digital age, controlling information and protecting the truth are vital tasks for any justice movement. Threats and retaliation, inner strength and willpower. Soon after the church incident was made public and widely reported, Clara Evans' family began receiving warning signals. Anonymous letters, threatening calls, and even signs of property vandalism darkened the family's atmosphere with unease and insecurity. Clara, a strong woman who had faced many challenges in career and life, now faced a new battle fighting those who sought to silence her and her family's voice for justice. The story began when Clara found a black envelope placed at her doorstep. Inside were subtle threats, warning her to stay silent or face consequences. Sophia, Clara's daughter, stood by her mother, eyes full of worry, but resolute. "Mom, I will always stand by you. We can't let them win." That evening, the family gathered to discuss responses. Clara spoke softly but with determination. "We cannot let them defeat us with these threats. Truth and justice are our strongest weapons. We must persist until our voices are heard." But the threats didn't stop there. One night while Clara and family slept, strange noises came from outside. Vandals had thrown stones, breaking a window, sending a clear message that they were watching and ready to act at any time. Despite facing danger and immense psychological pressure, Clara and her family did not falter. They knew resilience meant not only protecting themselves, but also holding on to faith in justice for the wider community. In the following days, they attended many community meetings, spoke at social events, encouraging others to keep fighting. Sophia, in a speech to the crowd, said, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but overcoming it to do what is right." My mother, Clara Evans, taught me that through her actions and strong heart. Clara's family's resilience quickly became a symbol of inner strength and personal bravery. They not only faced threats calmly, but also inspired thousands to stand up for justice. Through Clara's story, we realize that in the fight against injustice and racism, strength comes not only from laws or social movements, but from the indomitable will of individuals brave enough to confront danger to defend the truth. Clara and her family's courage is a valuable lesson in perseverance, showcasing the power of the human spirit facing the greatest challenges. It is also a reminder that each of us can become a hero in our own story if we dare to stand up and refuse to be intimidated by threats. Police reform, new policies and programs. In the context of the tense events involving Judge Clara Evans and Officer Nathan Cole becoming the focus of public attention, questions about change and reform in law enforcement have become increasingly urgent. Clara's story is not just a personal tragedy, but a testament to deep systemic issues many communities across the United States face. Therefore, the emergence of police reform policies serves as a beacon of hope, opening a new chapter in the struggle for justice and equality. One of the most significant advances is the mandatory use of body cameras on police officers. This policy aims not only to protect citizens from abuses of power, but also to shield officers from inaccurate accusations. Previously, many incidents involved conflicting verbal accounts, making justice difficult to achieve. But now, with clear audio and visual recordings, the truth is exposed more transparently than ever. However, implementing the camera system has faced challenges. Concerns over privacy, investment costs, and resistance from some police factions have delayed or hindered proper enforcement. There have been cases where cameras were turned off or not activated at critical moments, reducing the policy's effectiveness. This clearly shows that policy alone is not enough. Strict oversight and accountability across the system are also essential. Additionally, multicultural training programs have been introduced to eliminate deep prejudices and help officers better understand the diverse communities they serve. Clara once shared that lack of cultural awareness and differences led to unfortunate conflicts and misunderstandings. This training not only changes approaches, but also helps build trust, bridging gaps between police and the public. Complaint handling has also seen significant improvements with more independent and transparent mechanisms, replacing police-led investigations into their colleagues' misconduct. This enhances fairness and objectivity in addressing wrongful acts. Nonetheless, challenges remain, especially in areas with strong blue wall of silence cultures where complaints are often ignored or superficially addressed. We can look to experiences from major cities like Seattle, Portland, and Minneapolis, which have implemented ambitious reform policies. Although challenges persist and results are sometimes mixed, these efforts lay important groundwork for further progress. For example, Portland established an independent oversight committee and expanded social justice training for officers. Seattle invested heavily in body cameras and community feedback systems. These lessons show reform is a long-term process requiring persistent consensus among stakeholders and continuous oversight. Through the stories of Clara Nathan and the prolonged legal battle, it's clear that reform policies are not just dry regulations, but foundations to rebuild trust between police and communities. It is a difficult journey demanding courage from both law enforcement and the citizens they serve. Police reform is not the ultimate goal, but a first step toward a fairer society where everyone is respected and protected equally. And in that journey, Clara's story stands as a profound reminder that change begins with will action and collective solidarity. While debates on police reform continue vigorously in society, a lesser discussed but especially weighty story is that of Black officers and allies within the force who quietly fight from inside. They are voices of hope, daring to challenge old cultures, starting with small changes, gradually renewing a system long associated with prejudice and conservatism. Let's hear from Officer Marcus Lewis, a Black officer with over 15 years of service who has endured considerable pressure and internal discrimination. He said, "It's not always easy being a person of color in a force mostly made up of white colleagues. Sometimes I felt isolated, looked at with suspicion, even warned not to speak up too much. But from those experiences, Marcus decided to become part of the change. Marcus and a few close colleagues formed a small group within the force focusing on promoting multicultural training, anti-racism, and increased transparency in policing. They started by organizing workshops, sharing real stories, creating safe spaces for officers to openly acknowledge mistakes and learn. Gradually, their voices spread, fostering changes in how police interact with the communities, especially minority groups. However, the path is far from smooth. Allies within the force have faced resistance from conservative colleagues, including threats and isolation. Marcus shared, "Some days I came home exhausted, not just from the work out there, but the internal pressure. But I always believed that if no one stood up, change would never come." Besides Marcus, the story of female officer Sarah Mitchell, a white woman, also exemplifies internal transformation. Sarah once stood on the sidelines, sometimes unintentionally reinforcing prejudices. But after witnessing injustice against a minority family firsthand, she chose to change. Sarah became an active ally, collaborating with Black colleagues to advocate for human rights policies and stronger internal oversight. Sometimes you have to confront your own colleagues, but that's necessary to build a police force that truly serves the community. She said, "The presence of such allies brings diverse perspectives to internal dialogues and helps shift organizational culture. From small acts like changing communication styles to proposing stricter conduct regulations, they are daily building a new image of policing, one of fairness, transparency, and respect." Moreover, the presence of allies helps foster trust from the community, especially those groups that have suffered significant trauma. When they know there are people within the police force who genuinely listen and stand for justice, trust begins to be restored, an essential factor in reducing social tension and building lasting peace. However, for these reform voices to be strong and widespread, They need robust support from leadership levels alongside an independent, transparent oversight system. Courageous individuals should not be left to fight change alone. A safe and encouraging environment must be created so they can fully exercise their roles. The stories of Marcus, Sarah, and other allies vividly demonstrate the power of internal change, that real transformation must begin from within the organization, not just from external condemnation. More importantly, they show us that despite difficulties, persistence and courage will pave the way for a fairer future. At the heart of every major change lies fierce struggle, and the story of police reform is no exception. As allied officers begin speaking out, promoting transparency and accountability policies, another force simultaneously raises the banner to protect old values police interest groups and conservative political factions who vigorously lobby to maintain the status quo. Let's listen to the story of Senator Richard Hayes, a powerful figure in the state legislature known for supporting traditional police forces. When asked about ongoing reforms, he firmly stated, "We cannot let rushed decisions weaken the fighting spirit and effectiveness of the police. Public safety must come first." But behind those words lies a complex political battle where power, money, and influence intertwine. In state legislative chambers, these interest groups mobilize vast resources, from lobbying lawmakers to media campaigns, denying evidence of abuse and racial discrimination within police forces. They use every tactic to delay or weaken reform bills, even stirring fears in communities that changes will lead to rising crime. Conversely, civil rights activists and legislative allies continuously fight back. They debate relentlessly about the importance of justice, transparency, and equality. A fierce intellectual battle unfolds over months, with tense hearings and sharp confrontations across media outlets. Lisa Monroe, a social advocate, shared, "We understand changing a deeply rooted system is not easy, but we cannot accept silence or continue enduring injustice. Every step forward is progress for the future." Her words echo as a reminder of the perseverance needed on this long, challenging journey. The legislative struggle is not merely a clash of factions, but a lesson in the complexity of a system layered with overlapping interests. Those in power may be influenced by pressures from voters to lobbying groups. This demands that justice advocates have not only courage but also smart strategy and relentless patience. This story of political pressure reflects realities not just in one state or country, but symbolizes challenges faced by reform movements worldwide. Change doesn't come overnight. It is the result of countless small battles, ongoing dialogue, and most importantly, an unyielding will. For Clara Maya and their companions on this journey, political pressure is both a major challenge and a motivation to stand firm. "We are not fighting just for ourselves, but for millions, longing for a fairer future," Clara shared in an emotional interview. Clara Evans was once a powerful federal judge widely respected, but the event at her family's funeral, where she was treated unfairly and threatened at gunpoint by Officer Nathan Cole, forever changed her life. Clara became not only a victim of prejudice and abuse of power, but also a vivid symbol of the fight against injustice and racial discrimination within the legal system. Immediately after the incident, Clara faced numerous psychological challenges. Fear and trauma were not easily shaken, but a flame of determination burned within her. She realized that if she did not stand up and speak out, not only she but many others would continue to suffer. "I cannot let silence become complicity," Clara said in a powerful interview. Her journey from a powerful judge to a civil rights activist was far from easy. Clara had to learn to use her voice outside the courtroom, connect with communities, advocate for fairer policies, and join social movements. She traveled everywhere from small workshops to large protests, sharing her story as a living testimony to the injustices many endure. One evening at a local church, Clara stood before a crowd, her gaze firm, sharing, "We cannot wait for change to come from above. We ordinary people must speak up, act, and make a difference." Her words touched the hearts of hundreds present, inspiring a new generation of young activists. Beyond inspiring others, Clara focused on building legal and psychological support programs for victims of police violence. She collaborated with NGOs, civil rights lawyers, and mental health experts to create a comprehensive support network. "Each of us has the power to change society," Clara affirmed, "and that power begins with empathy and real action." On that journey, Clara also faced difficulties and opposition. Many within the police system and political circles still saw her as an enemy for daring to challenge traditional power. But she did not let that shake her belief. Sometimes standing up means facing the storm, but it's the only path to reclaim justice, she said. Years of struggle transformed Clara into a symbol of justice and resilience, not only in her city, but across the nation. Her story was covered by numerous media outlets, becoming a source of encouragement for millions across the U.S. and worldwide. Young activists looked up to her as a role model to learn from and follow. From a victim, Clara became an inspiration and a true social leader. She proved that regardless of background, every individual can become a guiding light, leading positive change within their community and broader society. In the modern world, social media is not merely a platform for sharing images or news updates. It has become a powerful weapon in the fight for justice, especially on issues related to racial discrimination and police violence. After becoming a symbol of the movement, Clara harnessed the power of social media to share her story, widely amplifying the voices of those long forgotten. The story of the funeral and Officer Nathan Cole drawing his gun on Clara, a powerful judge, was recorded by a witness on a phone. The video spread rapidly on platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, making it impossible for people to ignore the injustice unfolding in modern society. Every view, share, and comment was a silent call demanding transparency and fairness. The power of social media was evident through movements like Black Lives Matter, where millions worldwide spoke out against police violence and racial discrimination. Emotional photos, videos, and posts not only stirred empathy, but also pushed policymakers to act, leading to police reforms and stronger enforcement of justice. However, social media is a double-edged sword. Alongside spreading truth and positive pressure, it is also a venue for fake news, hostility, and societal division. Clara and her fellow activists understood they had to carefully manage information to ensure the voice of justice was not distorted by misinformation. In an interview, Clara said, "We cannot deny the power of social media. It is where everyone is heard and connected. But it is also where we must be vigilant to keep the struggle pure and truthful." Together with civil rights organizations, she helped set up monitoring groups, analyze information, and collaborate with investigative journalists to ensure news authenticity. Moreover, social media created opportunities for individuals to participate in the movement more easily than ever. From signing petitions and joining virtual protests to sharing personal stories, everyone could become part of the media revolution, helping change social awareness about racism and justice. Social media's progress was also shown through fundraising campaigns, supporting victims, sponsoring multicultural police training projects, and creating online forums to discuss injustice issues. Clara and her team frequently hosted live streams and podcasts to update the situation, creating open spaces for people to express opinions and propose solutions. Though challenges remain, the role of social media in changing awareness and action is undeniable. It transformed a deeply painful personal story into a blazing flame across communities, awakening conscience and driving vital progress in the fight for justice. In the digital age, no one can stand aside. Clara knew that only when everyone speaks up and acts together will real change begin. Clara stood on stage at a community gathering, the spotlight illuminating her determined and warm face. Before her were hundreds of people, different faces, but sharing one goal: fighting for justice and equality. The atmosphere was solemn yet vibrant, as if each word she spoke was a flame lighting hope in everyone's hearts. "We cannot remain silent any longer." Clara began, her voice gentle but firm, each word sinking into listeners' hearts. "Silence today is complicity tomorrow. Each of us has the power to change this society, starting with the smallest actions, speaking out against injustice, defending truth, and supporting the oppressed." She shared her personal story, the tense moments facing Officer Nathan Cole, her family's courage, and the community's strength that helped her stand firm and become a symbol of change. "This is not just my story, but ours, the story of those fighting for a fairer society." Everyone fell silent, feeling the simple yet profound truth: justice does not come by itself. It is made by the perseverance and courage of each individual. Clara looked around, meeting each gaze as if entrusting a commitment and responsibility. "We need your participation, not just in words, but in actions. Let's create change together, step by step, so the future no longer sees anyone lose their human rights because of skin color, prejudice, or injustice. Applause rose like a vow never to retreat. Clara ended with a heartfelt message: be the voice for those without one. Join me on this journey, and don't forget to subscribe to follow more stories, because justice is a journey with no end. The final words echoed through the hall, shaking everyone. Silence today is complicity tomorrow. It was not just a warning, but a guiding torch for all to remind each person that in the fight for justice, silence is never an option.